we're back, and we're going to be talking with school board candidate Paul Jones. Paul, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about you, about Paul.
So my name is Paul Jones. We moved here in 1985 from a place called Williamsburg, Iowa. When we got here, I was 15 years old and started going to the high school. High school had more people in it than the town did that I moved from, so this seemed like a very big place to me. Graduated from Dixon High in '88. Very shortly thereafter, I joined the U.S. Air Force as an operations intelligence specialist. Deployed to Saudi Arabia a couple of times as part of Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Thereafter, a couple of other unhappy places. Ended up in Somalia for a little while via Egypt. Got out in '96. Went to Memphis, got my degree in management information systems there in 2001, and then stayed in Memphis for probably longer than I should have. Moved to Nashville in 2011, and there I met the woman who would become my wife, Anna Carr, the younger daughter of Jeff Carr, who was the vice chancellor of Vanderbilt, or retired as the vice chancellor of Vanderbilt.
Okay.
We now live in her childhood home. We got married in that house, in fact. With 12, we live there now with 12 chickens, 6 cats, 2 kids, and a dog. Our children attend Stuart Burns Elementary. Mike is in 2nd grade, Mary's in 1st, and Mary's homesick today. So Mary, if you're listening, I love you. I hope you're feeling better.
Oh, yes. Mary, feel better.
Yes. Yeah. And that leads us up to today. I work as a computer programmer from home, which is good work when you can find it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
okay.
that gives me a good background on you. So let's talk about the qualifications. What qualifications do you hold that you feel would make a good school board representative?
So what I've been saying is that, and this has gotten a lot of positive feedback, is that the main thing that I am paying attention to is wokeism, specifically anti-wokeism. That is the thing that we need to reject and expel and resist in all ways that we can in the schools. It's a very dangerous and pernicious influence, and the longer it's allowed, if it's there, the longer it's allowed to take hold, the worse things are going to be. So that's my main concentration.
Okay, all right. In all of your travels and experience, why do you feel like you're the best candidate to take that on, to take that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's 2 parts to this story. The first part is why I'm running in the first place. And I don't know if you've been to school board meetings before, but they're not exactly grand fun. They are boring and tedious, and no one likes you. But having said that, a while ago, several people on the same day who don't know each other asked me with almost the same wording, Paul, when are you running for school board? And so I am taking that as strange as it may seem, a sign from God that I'm supposed to be running for school board. I don't know if he wants me to win, but I'm pretty sure he wants me to run, so I'm doing it.
Okay.
So that's part 1. Part 2 is when it comes to, again, wokeism. Again, I think it's a dangerous thing. I have been affected by it myself in my own personal and professional life. I have been let go from a job over social media posts regarding that. I have been, people have tried to eject me from projects that I've started based on that. I have been threatened with physical mutilation based on my anti-woke stand. And it wasn't called wokeism at the time, same idea. So knowing what goes on with that, and knowing that there is sort of a nationwide movement in that direction in all aspects of life, not just our schools, those are things that I think are worth paying attention to. And having started running, I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it openly. Someone needs to be talking about it openly. Someone needs to be pushing back against it, or at least be paying attention to it at the school board level. And I think I'm a person who would be well suited to do that.
Okay. What do you think differentiates you from the other candidates running in your district?
So I don't like the idea of punching to the right. There's enough on the left that we ought to be focusing our energies against. So I don't have anything bad personally to say about any of the other candidates. As far as differentiation is concerned, I've only spoken with them a couple of times, once really, at the Republican County Party Republican Party meeting, Dixon County, and they both seemed fine to me at the time. I don't think their focus is as much on the things that my focus is on, but that's up to the voters to decide if that's what they want or not.
Absolutely. So, what attributes, behaviors, characteristics are essential for a good school board member to have?
No one's ever asked me that before. That's a really good question. So, the first thing is to remember who it is you are serving and what interests you are trying to promote. My position is that the primary people you are serving are the parents of the children who have their kids in the system. It is the parents who are responsible for the children. They're the ones with ultimate authority over the children. And that is the interest you must serve. I've talked about this with a couple of other people. In a way, it comes down to who's responsible for these kids. Who is the ultimate authority over them? Of course, the ultimate authority is that these children belong first to God. God has given those children to those parents. The parents are therefore the responsibility, the authority over them. They delegate that authority for their education, or they ought to be allowed to delegate their authority for their education to whomever they wish. If they wish to delegate it to the government for schooling, great. If they wish to delegate it to someone else, great. But that's one of the primary characteristics you need to have in the school board, is remember that you're here to serve not the institution per se, but the parents who need the education for their children.
Okay. How do you know that you're meeting those needs, those goals?
Pretty sure the parents will tell me if I'm not.
Okay. All right. So I asked Mr. Underwood earlier, how important is accessibility? You talk about parents telling you if you're not meeting those needs. How important is it to be accessible so you can hear that stuff?
So accessibility and accountability are a big deal. One of the problems is that there's only so much time in the day. There's only one of me. There's only a total of 6 board members. There's only so many hours that they can receive stuff.
Right.
But one of the primary places for receiving that feedback is the school board meetings. Mm-hmm. Up until recently, the school board meetings have been, I'm sorry if this sounds derogatory, remarkably resistant to hearing feedback from people. I understand that there's now an easier process in place for being able to speak in front of the school board. And maybe there are rules around how the school board is allowed to behave. I don't know what those are. But having attended these meetings, essentially silently, in person, for a year or more, it always struck me as I didn't like the fact that the board would sit and listen stony-faced and not respond in the meeting. So it's like you're speaking to a wall. Further, whoever it was who rose to speak to the board was subject to a time limit, which I understand is necessary. 2-3 minute time limit is fine. But the alarming on the time was always very loud and literally like an alarm klaxon going off to indicate that your time is done, sit down. And there was never any response from the board from whoever was speaking. And that doesn't strike me as particularly responsive to the people who are trying to air their grievances or bring things to the board.
Right.
And again, maybe there are rules around that. Maybe by law they're not allowed to respond. I don't know. But I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I don't see why the board, if there is no law against it, cannot modify its own policies to allow responses.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What do you feel is the purpose, the role that the school board plays in our education system locally?
So this not so much a question of my feeling as what their role is as defined by law. First of all, my understanding is that they are primarily to set policy. They're not there to micromanage the superintendent or
Right.
the staff, anything like that. But with that in mind, a regular review and revision of policy is probably in order. Further, when there are emergency circumstances, as we saw in 2019, 2020, being able to address those emergency circumstances in what I would call a more effective manner would be in order. That would be one of their responsibilities as well. And that's not to bash anybody or what anyone did at the time.
Sure.
But I think looking back, we can see that perhaps things could have been handled differently.
Paul, we were talking before the break. What are some areas regarding student achievement that you see could be improved upon if you were a board member with the board?
So the first thing that comes to mind is that apparently the state of Tennessee has reinstituted third grade testing to make sure that the kids are going to be able to succeed once they get past it. I have not looked deeply into the history of when that was implemented or why, but it does occur to me that, as we mentioned earlier, the policy responses to COVID-19 may have had an effect on student learning, student achievement at the elementary levels. Certainly the fact that they were subjected to certain policies, that has, in my mind, it's reasonable to think that those policies actually had an effect on loss of learning for those kids. And so now we're caught by saying, the policies have caused this. But they don't quite want to say the policies have caused this. You say, we just need a test. And it's a tough spot to be in. I don't know that I have an actual solution for that. That I hear some people saying, we just need to send them to summer school, help them catch up. If it was, let's just say that there was a year of lost learning, and that's a delay that simply cannot be helped because of the policies that were put in place. If it was possible to teach these children a year's worth of stuff in 3 months, don't we think we'd already be doing it? So I'm not sure that that's actually they're going to be able to pull that off. It may be that there has to be some more less happy thing to do, and say, it's not just a question of testing. We need to admit that the policy was, in those terms, was not a good policy.
Right.
And now we need to, I don't know what you would do, find tutors for them, something, but recognize that it's going to take more than summer school to give these children the things that they were promised in terms of their education. Do I know what those things are? No. Being on the board, I would have more opportunity to explore those kinds of things. Whether the board would have the power to implement those things, again, I don't know. I don't know what the law is around that. So probably not a very satisfactory answer, but that's the best I can tell you.
Okay. Yeah, that third grade retention law, since it is a state law and the policy around it, our local district is very limited as to what they can do. That does, it's
sort of bind your hands.
right. So how do you, what do you do? What do you do to help shape that on the local level?
So again, that's one of those things where I have not, so just as background, I've never been in politics before. I don't know the kinds of discussions that can be had, but again, politics is the art of what is possible to do. And I simply don't know what the constraints and boundaries are around those things that are possible at this point. Obviously, whatever can be done should be done within the constraints that are available, but that's an easy answer.
Right.
The real answer is I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows, and they're not going to know until they get in and actually try to do something and see if it works or not.
Okay. So, what are some areas of well, hold on just a second. I got wrapped up in your response, and I forgot I forgot my next question.
And you've got the notes.
I
too.
do.
I'm
I
sitting
do.
here.
I've you got me wrapped up in your train of thought there. What's the best way to address differences in opinion on the school board? So let's say you got 6 people up there. Everybody has their own thought process. They've got their own constituents that are coming to them and saying, this is what we feel is right. How do you work through that?
So that's an extremely tough problem, and especially when you're the new guy,
Right?
which is what
Yeah.
I will be.
Yep.
I can tell you how I've attempted to solve those things in other projects that I've been on. With lots of, and again, I'm a computer programmer by trade. Computer programmers argue. They argue over about the smallest little details of things that don't actually matter. So having these kinds of arguments is not something I'm unfamiliar with. The first thing is, when it comes to matters of opinion, is to first of all recognize that they are matters of opinion, and try to find those places where we can have discussions of fact. But then the question becomes, what things are the facts that we're going to admit into the discussion? I have like I said earlier, I have a business degree in information systems. There's a management consultant, a guy named Peter Drucker. One of the things that Peter Drucker said is that very often people in these discussions will say, "Well, we need to let the facts guide us." The problem is that there is an infinite number of facts in the world, and you need to choose which ones you're going to use to guide you. So what you need to understand first is that all facts are filtered through a worldview. If we can determine what the worldview is of each person on the board and where those worldviews align, then we can determine which facts ought to be admitted as relevant. And from there, we can begin to come up with a solution that's not based on opinion, per se, but is based on what we think will work, and then come up with a test to see if it works or not. At that point, we can decide if that's the right way to go. Now, getting people to actually go along with that depends on their worldview, whether they think that's actually the right way of doing it. But that's how I've approached problems in the past. It's been moderately successful. Some people simply don't want to do that. But I think all of the people on the board are persons of goodwill who seek the same end. And I think that would make that kind of thing a lot easier.
Okay. All right. What do you feel like the district should do better in preparing our students for life after high school? Either to go ahead and go into their career or to continue their education.
Sure.
What do we do to improve that?
So I think the emphasis on college preparation is already there. Whether or not colleges are still suitable places for people to go these days, I don't know. That's a separate discussion. My understanding is that vocational education has fallen a bit by the wayside. Some greater emphasis on that is probably well advised. But overall, if there is one thing that I found lacking in my own government school education, was a concentration on the things of daily life. For example, finance. What are credit cards? How do they work? What is a loan? How does it work? What does a bank do for you? Are your funds in the bank, or is the money that you put in the bank actually yours, or is it an unsecured loan to the bank?
Right.
Things like that. There are a lot of ways to get in trouble financially that people graduating from high school simply are not prepared for.
Right.
The more of that kind of thing they know, probably the better. And that's just one aspect of daily life. We could talk about civics lessons, but I think civics has changed rather dramatically since I graduated in 1988. So the lessons that I learned then might not be applicable now. But things like that I think are valuable.
Okay. And what should we or are we doing that could be improved upon now that would better prepare our students to be good citizens?
So I think the earlier answer applies, knowing how these, again, financial institutions, other civil institutions, and corporate institutions all interact with each other. I think it'd be useful. But aside from that, I don't have any broad scale answers.
Okay. All right. We're about out of time for this segment. is there anything that you would like to add that we didn't get to touch on that you'd like to say to the voters in District 1 about why they should come out and vote for you?
So first of all, you can go to my website, my election website, at pmjones.us. That's pmjones.us. You can also contact me if you want. There should be some contact information on there as well. If it's not there right now, it will be later today. And again, if you are, well, actually, there's one more thing. We have a lot of centralization in Dixon. We're trying to make bigger schools with more students in them. I had a discussion with a Discovery School parent. She was very concerned that the very smallness of their school made it a target. And I wanted to reassure her then and say now to everyone here that my biases are not towards bigger and more centralized, but rather towards smaller, more decentralized, and more distributed. That goes along with the idea of school vouchers, allowing the parents to choose where their kids go to school, whether they homeschool them or not. That's where my biases lie. That's not to say that I don't think that the government schooling institution has no value. That's to say that the parents ought to have more choices than they have now. And what we need is not necessarily efficiency of financial dollars so much as effectiveness in the outcomes of the education of our children.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining
Thank you
me.
for having me.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your thoughts, and you had some interesting, thought-provoking things to say, so I appreciate it. Again, Paul Jones is running for District 1 School Board Representative. Now, this Republican primary, in this particular race, the school board candidate that takes that seat over for Kirk will be decided in this primary race. So it's important that everybody get out in District 1 and vote. Well, it's important that everybody get out and vote, period. But in District 1, this race will be decided during the primary. So let's see, you can go to Charlotte to early vote. You can go to the public library or the Dixon County Government Building for early voting. You can go to WDKN.com and check out polling hours and things like that. This is, of course, leading up to the March 5th primary election. So be sure, if you haven't early voted yet, please go early vote and do your civic duty.